pretty crazy, the level to which people rationalize this stuff. And what they say basically is that, well, we will not tolerate anybody in this country who defends terrorists or terrorism. We will not allow anyone in this country who, promotes terrorism or promotes Hamas or language like that. And so what they're really saying is anyone who speaks out against Israel's conduct in the war is also supporting Hamas, and therefore they should be deported out of the country. And this is a level of political gaslighting that is so beyond anything that I've seen in quite some time. I mean, it reminds me in many ways of the Iraq War. During the Iraq War, the right wing in America aligned itself in such a way that they supported the war completely uncritically. They never said anything about, Bush possibly being wrong or our motives for entering the war being flawed or anything like that. They simply just said, hey, we have to do this because we have to stop those damn terrorists. We have to kill as many terrorists as we can. We have to put this to an end once and for all. And it didn't matter that, Iraq is not where 9/11 originated from. Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11. Saddam Hussein had nothing to do with 9/11. It was just, we have to kill terrorists. And if you ever dare speak out against the Iraq War, you're supporting the terrorists. You hate your country. You hate America. So it was a very kind of bizarre, frightening sort of time to live through when you listen to the right-wing propaganda about it. And it's much more disturbing to me in many ways because we're living through it again just a short time later. So what you hear now is people like Marco Rubio saying, yeah, of course, we have to deport Hamas supporters. And the thing that Rubio kept saying he had an interview with Face the Nation where he talks about this and the Houthis, the Khalil situation and the Houthi strikes. We'll talk about the Houthis later in the show, but, Rubio basically says multiple times in this interview, yeah, well, of course we had to get rid of this kid. Of course we had to, detain him and potentially we'll deport him. And we're going to deport anyone who's a guest in our country for supporting terrorists. So there's no proof this kid funded terrorists. There's no proof this kid did anything but participate in protests. So in other words, this is obviously a violation of his First Amendment rights. Now, I know there are a lot of people on the right wing who are saying, but he's not a citizen. He doesn't have First Amendment rights. He's a guest here. He's on an H-1B visa. He's not really an American citizen. Well, I don't know if you realize this or not. The Constitution is not designed to enumerate just the rights of citizens. The Constitution is designed to limit the government's power. That's what the founders intended. The founders wanted to make sure, because you have to remember, for the founders, belonging to the nation was not as much of an important thing because there was a belief among many of the founders that the nation as a whole, the United States of America, was really kind of an amalgam of smaller forms of government working together under one unified system, right? So there wasn't so much this obsession with identifying as a citizen of this country and being given certain protections. The Constitution was written in a way where the government is going to make sure that it does not encroach upon your liberties, that it's only, it's empowered to serve the people, right? Which it really doesn't do that much, that often anymore anyway. But it's empowered to serve the people. It's empowered to do right by the people. And it's restricted from infringing on the liberties of the people. And that includes non-citizens. So the government does not have the power to censor the speech of non-citizens in this country, be they green card holders or not, right? But here they are deporting this kid, And when you are attempting to, they have him in custody now. They put him in one facility, they move him to another one. They claim it's because of bed bugs. The bed bugs are phantom bed bugs. They're not even there, right? There's other prisoners being sent into this, or other detainees being brought into this facility as they're pulling this kid out, sending him all the way to Louisiana, halfway across the country, right? And they're doing all of this because he's speaking out against Israel. And it's amazing. Do you think the founders ever intended for a foreign country to have so much power and influence over our government such that our government would prosecute citizens who were speaking out against a foreign government, not our own government? And granted, look, the student protests at Columbia and the student protests all over the country last year, into this year, have been criticizing our government a great deal as well. It hasn't just been focused on Israel. But the criticisms of our government have been directly targeted based on the idea that our government helps prop up Israel in such a way that it's enabling Israel to do the things that it has done in Gaza thus far. So in other words, perhaps Israel's conduct would be quite different had it not been for the U.S. support, either in the form of dollars or in the form of rhetoric, etc. And, you know, it's just an amazing kind of thing when you think that this kid really just spoke his mind, right? He's an educated kid who came over here on a visa. He was just finished his master's at Columbia, no easy feat. And, you know, all of this, you know, in the climate of these protests where people are getting doxxed, where people are being threatened to be kicked out of the university, which, by the way, if you're an immigrant student, it's not the same as being one of these rich kids who goes to Columbia from America. Because if you're a rich New York kid and you go to Columbia and you're kicked out, you just go home to your parents or your friends or something like that. But if you're an immigrant from another country and you're kicked out of Columbia, you're homeless. You can't just go home, right? It's not that simple. There's the cost of traveling. There could potentially be, you know, issues getting out of the country depending on why you were kicked out of Columbia and the way that they're prosecuting people now. So it's, you know, and even if you get out of the country, you might not be able to get back into the country, which is a huge problem, because you're potentially leaving all your stuff here. You know, so in the climate of all of this stuff, this kid happens to finish his master's degree, and now he's being prosecuted for his role in these protests, for basically being chief negotiator, trying to actually, it sounds like, come to some sort of resolution with campus administration or with Columbia's administrative, people to end the protests. And, you know, here he is being punished for our sins, essentially, like. And it's a really gross sort of abuse of power by the federal government. But it's also like, God, we live in a world of such bizarre contradictions. Because it's crazy to me that you have the right wing talk to us day and night and day and night and day and night about civil liberties. And the right wing for years was, we are pure constitutionalists, reduce the size of the federal government, this, that, and the other. And then you get Trump in office, right? And what happens? Okay, you get Trump into office and he's doing all of these things from the executive level, vis-a-vis executive orders, creating new branches of the executive branch, dismantling, trying to dismantle the Department of Education, all of this, I would call it extra executive, kind of a weird way to say it, but powers that are beyond the executive branch, well beyond the executive branch. And the conservatives respond, well, now they've developed this whole legal theory called post-originalism. So what it means is like you have legal theorists, conservative legal theorists, come out with this sort of BS narrative about, okay, well, we're still conservatives. We still like the Constitution, but we believe the Constitution, liking the Constitution also takes into account the context in history where it was developed. And you have to think back to Plato and Thomas Aquinas and all these different people. And then the president is beholden to protecting those values as well as the Constitution and blah, blah, blah. And it gets into such bizarre sort of rationalization where these people are just saying, okay, anything that the president does that's for our side can be justified as aligning with our principles, even when it doesn't. So we're the party of pro-civil liberties and pro-free speech and all of that stuff. But as soon as someone comes around who we don't like saying this stuff, deport him. As soon as these students are protesting in a way that we don't like, kick them out of school, dox them. You know, again and again and again, for years and years and years, I heard people tell me free speech, free speech, free speech, the intolerant left, the snowflakes, PC censorship, all of this nonsense. And then the right wing reflexively just starts deporting campus protesters that they don't like. So this poor kid, man, I mean, we're all kind of pulling, right, I would think. And he's not the only one, by the way. There have been other people who have been detained by Immigration Customs Enforcement. There have been other students who have been kicked out of their universities, arrested. You know, we said it last year, keep fighting the good fight, right? If you believe in this cause, keep protesting. And if you don't believe in this cause, how dare you advocate for these people to be punished for speaking their mind? How dare you advocate for these people to not have the right to assembly that's delineated in the Constitution? It's absolutely disgusting. And it goes into what we opened the show with. What did we talk about at the open of the show? We talked about how political discourse today has shifted in such a way that you assume the other person did not reach their conclusions rationally, with evidence, etc. And we also assume that we ourselves do not have biases. So to me, the only way you could justify kicking someone out of the country for their point of view has to be because you don't think they rationally reached their conclusion, you don't think they're using evidence, and you think that you're not biased and they are. So you have to delude yourself. And we also talked about in the show the bombing of Gaza. And I said to you guys, look, the people who support Israel, they look at Gazans like they're the enemy. Not Hamas, they look at Gazans like they're the enemy. In a fight for Israel's survival, the people of Gaza are the enemy. Okay? And you need to believe that in the context of a war to justify killing those people. It's the same thing in Russia and Ukraine. No wonder the comments section of my debates gets so heated. Because if you're Ukrainian, you need to believe that the Russians are the enemy. If you're Russian, you need to believe the Ukrainians are the enemy. You need to buy into that propaganda because you need that propaganda to justify killing another person. And so when you try to inject any kind of civility into the discourse, any kind of rational thinking about, well, haven't you considered the other side, you're met with vitriol and hate because the other person, or the people I'm trying to win over, I've tried to win over, you know, what they're thinking is, no, you don't understand. This is the enemy. This is the enemy. And I do get that. I get it logically. But what I feel like urging people to understand is, we need to kind of get the fact that this is wartime thinking. And wartime thinking is short-sighted. Wartime thinking is incredibly short-sighted. We look at the immediate objective and we say, hey, we got to beat them. So let's just forget this, that, and the other consideration. We have to win. And at this point, for the Ukrainians, whether it was a justified moral war or not, they are not winning.